We have a wonderful reading from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning, a very fun reading. I want you to listen for all the scandal and all the intrigue that's going on in this reading from the book of 2 Samuel. This is 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verses 1 through 15. This is the story of David and Bathsheba. And so listen to what the Spirit might speak into your life today in this reading from 2 Samuel 11 and 1. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's palace, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now, she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite, her husband." And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the king's house with all the other servants of the Lord, and he did not go down to his own house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his own house, David said to Uriah, "You've just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I go down to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here also today, and tomorrow I'll send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on the couch with the servants of his Lord and did not go down to his own house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah at the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Did you catch all that? That was scandalous. That was a true scandal, the likes of which I don't know if we've seen in this country. Or have we? David the psalmist, David the sexual predator, David the murderer. I had already begun to write a very nice sermon based on our reading from Ephesians that we heard, that Sally read. I was going to talk about the fullness of God and how it can fill up our emptiness. But I visited Nancy Green this past Wednesday, and she wanted to talk about scandals. No, not in a bad way. She was disturbed by scandals. She said, "Do we even get scandalized anymore? What would it take to scandalize us in these days? What would it even take?" And so I have Nancy to thank for changing horses in midstream and for rewriting a different sermon based on a different text, because this, our Hebrew reading for today, is indeed the story of a scandal. What would it take to scandalize us? What about the things that ought to be scandals in our times? Why is it that some of the worst perpetrators of abuse are completely protected from scandal as long as they're popular, whereas less powerful people are held to fierce public scrutiny? Why is it that some people can commit crimes and the public just shrugs, while others cannot so much as get a parking ticket without public outrage? What would it take for certain persons to be held accountable in this day and age? Nancy Green actually helped me to plan this sermon, and so Nancy, if you're watching, I don't know which camera to look at, but if you're watching, this one is for you. This is the sermon you helped to create. Let's talk about scandals, because King David gives us quite the scandal here. David's reign was haunted by this scandal that we just read. Did you see how he abuses his power, manipulating a woman into relations with him? He abuses the goodwill of his people, and then he commits murder. And before all of that, he sends his soldiers off to fight and stays home and relaxes on the roof on his couch till the afternoon. Bathsheba and her husband Uriah are to be celebrated, for they both possess one thing that David clearly lacks: integrity. They both have a degree of integrity that we don't see, at least in this story about David. Too much power has made him feel entitled to the people around him, to do whatever he wants to them. Too much power has not been good for his soul, and he needs to be humbled. But public scandal is not the worst kind of judgment we face, is it? Into every life there comes a moment, maybe even daily, maybe more than once a day, where we have to look our conscience full in the face and hear our own judgment of ourselves. There comes a silent moment when we have to live with our secrets, because we are our secrets. And the world will have to live with our secrets, whether they know the secrets or not. Integrity is costly. But you know what's costlier? Selling your soul. Integrity is costly. It cost Uriah his life. But better to die for the good than to live for selfishness and deceit. Living with integrity is its own kind of scandal in these times. Integrity is a scandal for modern times. I have a niece who went to New York to make her fortune. In small-town Ohio, she had been the star in every high school musical. She was beautiful. She was a wonderful singer. She still is. Upon graduation from high school, she did what many such small-town stars do. She went to New York and went to acting school. And as she waited for her big break, she also waited tables, hoping for a big break on Broadway or Hollywood, or maybe even just making commercials. The big break never came. She was good. She was Ohio good, you might say. But there's just so much competition in New York. Once in Manhattan, in a restaurant, she was waiting on a famous actor, and I really wish I could tell you who this guy is, but I'm afraid of getting sued. She waited on a famous actor, truly a very big name indeed, a bit older than my father. He flirted with her, and he flattered her, and he promised to recommend her to the Hollywood scouting agents if only she would join him in his hotel room. He said, "You know, it doesn't matter how good you are in this business. It matters who you know. And if you get my name attached to you, if I vouch for you, you'll go places." She didn't do it. I'm very proud of her. She didn't do it. My dear niece was already engaged to be married to another aspiring actor, likewise waiting for his big break. And so she declined the celebrity's offer, and now she is a happily married mother of two back in Ohio, not famous, but in possession of a clear conscience, which is a true joy. A true joy indeed. I'm proud of her. Integrity is costly, but worth it. I'm less pleased with this celebrity. I don't even like to watch his movies anymore. And he's in a lot of them. And he tends to play the wise sage, which seems kind of ironic. He thought that he could use his fame to just have anybody. Is that what fame does to us? Is that what power does to us? It makes us feel entitled to the people around us. It makes us feel like we can have whatever we want. I'd like to tell you his name, but like I said, I can't. I'll get sued. And yet there are names that we do know. People who have disappointed us. I loved Garrison Keillor. Absolutely loved him. And if you're under 50, you might not even know who he is. With his radio show, his Prairie Home Companion, and his Tales from Lake Wobegon, his grainy, hesitant voice can make me smile. I still almost can't believe it that he, too, was accused of sexual misconduct. And Bill Cosby. Who didn't love Bill Cosby, of my generation at least? He was the playful, fun dad we never had. He was great. And scores of so many so-called family values politicians with underage victims who walk away with complete impunity. As one of them said of his female victims, when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. And then there's King David, one of the greatest heroes of our faith. What do we do about this? What do we do about David? Back in 1 Samuel, David is named a man after God's own heart. Did you catch all the intrigue and the scheming in our reading today? I keep telling you to read the Samuels. They're good. In the Samuel books, much meaning is hidden in the details. David's men have been sent off to war. David himself doesn't go. Any good king would. David stays home and sleeps until the late afternoon. And then when he gets up, he's feeling restless. And he walks around on the roof of the palace. He spies a beautiful woman bathing in what she believes is the privacy of her own home. But he's got a position from the rooftop. And he's a star. He's the king. He's David. He can do what he wants. He can have whoever he wants. He sends for her, and he essentially violates her. For what could Bathsheba do? He's the king. But then Bathsheba does a brave thing. She misses her monthly cycle, and she sends word to the perpetrator to let him know the trouble that he has caused. If word of this gets out, David could be in pretty big trouble. After all, her husband Uriah is off fighting his war for him. He's a captain in David's army. And he's been away for months. So everyone knows the kid is not his. David needs Uriah to believe that the baby is indeed his child. And so he calls Uriah from the front lines under the pretext of asking him, "Hey, how's the war going? Everything good? How's Joab as a boss? You like him?" Then David tells him, "Thanks. Well, good conversation. You take a little furlough now. You go visit your wife. Go spend a few nights at home." Uriah goes, but he does not go to his home, and he does not see his wife. For in Uriah's military code of honor, that would be dishonorable, while his brothers in arms are out on the battlefield. David clearly has no scruples about that. Such a decent fellow, Uriah. Uriah the Hittite, he's not even Jewish. He's a Gentile. David invites Uriah back again, and this time he gets him drunk. And he says, "Now go sleep with your wife." But even drunk, Uriah's honor will not permit it. He can't experience pleasure while his fellow soldiers are experiencing hardship. I think maybe David felt a little criticized by that. I think maybe David took it a little personally because clearly David was home experiencing much pleasure. I think that made Uriah all the easier to murder. And so David sends a letter back by Uriah's own hand commanding that Uriah be put on the front lines and then everybody just sort of disappear and leave him there by himself so that he'll be killed. Uriah dies. David's secret is safe for now. But you can see what's at stake here. David's soldiers cannot find out that he has been home raping their wives while they're out there fighting his wars. Even a star like David might not survive that kind of scandal, that kind of behavior. And that is a first-rate scandal. I keep encouraging you to read 1st and 2nd Samuel. They're full of wonderful stories and imperfect characters and fallible heroes. Heroes who fail in big ways. But what makes the heroes in the Hebrew Scriptures and in our world so very fallible? What makes them so prone to abuse their power? Is it true that when you're a star you can do anything? It seems like it. O.J. Simpson got away with murder and bragged about it. Politicians get away with all manner of misdeeds. And in some known cases, their cronies have protected pedophiles just in order to remain in power. Too much power. It goes to our heads. It gets us in trouble. It takes a very strong character to negotiate their own power. Whether that power be political or relational or social, like the power that comes from being famous or rich. You know, John Calvin knew this when he decided that the Reformed, that's to say Presbyterian churches, would be ruled not by clergy, but by committees. Committees. We're always trying to get you to be on committees. But there's a good reason for this. You don't want me in charge of everything. It would not be good. It might go to my head. When any organization is ruled by committees like a church session, it's slow and it's cumbersome. It's hard to react in real time when the session meets once a month, and never in July and never in December. And presbytery only meets what? I don't even know. 4 times a year? Just try to get anything urgent done under such a system. But no single person holds power. Power is vested in the collective, in the body. Now, we are not jingoistic about being Presbyterian here. We try to be ecumenical, and we see the good that comes out of many faith traditions, not all of them even Christian. And we borrow wisdom from many sources. But I dare say, churches that are ruled by the collective, by committees, as cumbersome as they are, often end up with fewer scandals because decisions are made out in the open, because more than one person is involved, because nobody holds any power. Too much power is bad for the soul. And so back to Nancy Green's question, and it's a good one. What would it take to scandalize us in these times? What would even scandalize us? Clearly, climate change and school shootings aren't doing it for us. What would it take to scandalize us in these times? I think we are all living in a state of constant fatigue and overload. We have too much information to process at all times. I don't think there's ever going to be a civil war because we're too busy ordering McDonald's and having it delivered to our homes and scrolling funny cat videos on Instagram. We are King David on the roof. We don't have the energy for a civil war. Sometimes indifference, sometimes what feels like fatigue, is a trauma response. I was at a wedding in a barn in Butler County on a farm that has belonged in my wife's family for almost 200 years. They did a barn wedding. Someone came and whispered during the reception that there had been an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The shooting actually occurred quite close to the barn. There were at least 200 guests, and I had one of 3 neckties at that wedding. Some attendees were wearing their very best MAGA hats. And do you know how they responded to the news about the shooting? Is he okay? It's a good thing those liberals can't shoot. Pass the salt. This ham's a little dry. Nobody was shocked. Nobody was scandalized. And even though most of them supported him, nobody was all that upset, it didn't seem. People will feign shock when someone they don't like does something even slightly inappropriate, but mostly we don't shock very easily anymore. It would take a lot to scandalize us. But let's look again at Uriah and Bathsheba. Bathsheba stood up to David's power as best she could. She sent him word and said, hey, you made a mess. You need to do something about this. You gave me a big problem, and it's going to be your problem too. You have to do something here. And Uriah maintains his virtue even when the slothful king does not do the same. Integrity. We have to live with our consciences. We have to live with integrity even when the world around us does not, even when those in power do not. For we too live under systems that protect abusers. As long as they're powerful, as long as they're popular, or rich, or famous, or maybe even if they're just the right sex, or the right race, or the right social class. This is not how the world is supposed to be. This thing that Jesus called the kingdom, it doesn't work like this. This thing that Jesus called the kingdom, that is where our first citizenship is. And its rules are very different. Even when this world's iconic figures and leaders fail to live in honorable ways, you and I are called to a higher standard. Integrity. As tired as we are, as overstimulated as we are, and I think we are, we need to reclaim our sense of righteous indignation, outrage. We can do this by dwelling not on all that is wrong, but by dwelling on what ought to be. The world that ought to be. That's what the kingdom is. The world that ought to be if it is not. Let's expect better of ourselves and of others, especially those in positions of power. And whatever befalls, we will live our lives with hope and with joy and with clear consciences. Integrity is costly, but you know what's costlier? Selling your soul. Living with a guilty conscience. Living with integrity is a true scandal for modern times. Amen.